Lily's breath was coming in sharp, wheezing gasps, her tiny fingers digging into my arm as I carried her into the emergency room. A nurse rushed toward us, barking orders, and I barely registered what was happening as they pried her out of my arms. Someone asked me questions. How long had she been struggling to breathe? Was she allergic to anything? Had this happened before? I answered automatically, my brain firing on instinct, but another part of me, a colder, sharper part, was already noticing something else. My phone had been in my pocket the entire time, vibrating. Not with Emily calling to check in. Not with Emily telling me she was on her way. But with nothing. I texted her as soon as Lily was stable. She's in the hospital. She couldn't breathe. 3 dots appeared. Vanished. Appeared again. Then finally, OMG, that's awful. Keep me updated. Keep me updated? The doctor was still talking, explaining Lily's condition. But my brain had locked onto those 3 words like a predator catching a scent. My fingers moved on their own. Where are you? More dots. Another pause. And then, at the farm with Ashley. Bad signal. Can't talk. No. That wasn't right. That wasn't normal. Ashley's family owned some land about an hour away. Emily had been going there more often lately, always overnight, always just to get away. And I had never questioned it. Not really. Not until this exact second. Standing under the 2 bright hospital lights, my daughter asleep in a bed. My wife acting like this was a minor inconvenience instead of our child fighting to breathe. I called. No answer. I texted again. Call me. Now. Nothing. I felt something shift in me. Something final. Something ugly. I pulled out my car keys. The doctor was still talking, but I barely heard him. I arranged for Lily to stay under observation, left instructions for my sister to come sit with her, and walked straight out of the hospital with a single goal in mind. I was going to the farm, and I wasn't leaving until I knew the truth. I stood in the hospital corridor, my phone still gripped in my hand, the screen glowing with that pathetic excuse of a message. At the farm with Ashley. Bad signal. Can't talk. I don't know how long I stared at those words. Seconds? Minutes? The rage was slow, like a pot left on a low flame, heating up gradually until it reached a rolling boil. Lily was stable now, asleep with soft, steady breaths. The doctors told me she'd be okay, that I could rest. Rest? How the hell was I supposed to rest? My wife, Lily's mother, wasn't here. She was out there somewhere with Ashley, conveniently unreachable. I had ignored it for too long. The late nights, the weird distance, the phone she suddenly kept on silent. The girls' weekends that started lasting longer and longer. My mind kept circling one ugly, unavoidable thought. What if she wasn't with Ashley at all? I exhaled slowly, then moved. I wasn't going to sit around waiting for another half-assed text. I wasn't going to let this feeling eat me alive while she laughed and drank wine with her friend. I was going to the farm. I left Lily in the care of the nurses, told them I'd be back soon, and walked out to my car. The night was cold, sharp. My hands were steady, my mind oddly clear as I drove. No radio, no distractions. Just me and the open road, the engine humming beneath the weight of what I might find. It was a 2-hour drive, long enough for doubt to creep in, long enough for that little voice in my head to whisper that maybe I was overreacting. But then I'd remember Lily's tiny hand in mine, her weak, gasping breaths, and my wife's message. OMG, that's awful. Keep me updated. I pressed harder on the gas. By the time I reached the long, winding road leading up to the farm, my pulse was pounding, but not from fear. From certainty. The house was dark except for a soft glow from the barn. Strange. Ashley's parents' place was big, old-fashioned, with a wraparound porch and usually well-lit at night. But this time, the main house was silent, the only sign of life coming from that barn. I parked at a distance, out of sight, and stepped out into the cold night air. The crunch of gravel under my shoes was the only sound. My breath was steady. My hands were steady. But something in my chest felt like it was preparing for impact. I walked toward the barn, careful, quiet. The closer I got, the clearer things became. Laughter. A woman's voice. Then a man's. Not Ashley's. I stopped dead in my tracks, my stomach dropping like a stone in water. Emily's laugh rang out, light, flirtatious. Another voice followed, deeper, smoother. A man's chuckle. For a second, my body didn't move. My brain refused to process what it already knew. Then I moved closer, pressing myself against the barn's wooden wall. The doors were slightly ajar, just enough for me to see inside without being seen. And there she was, Emily standing close, too close to some guy I didn't recognize, some guy who wasn't Ashley. She had a drink in her hand, swaying slightly, laughing at something he said. He leaned in, murmuring something against her ear, and she, God help me, tilted her head toward him like it was the most natural thing in the world. My mind fractured into two versions of reality. The one where I was still her husband, still the man she kissed before bed, still the father of her child. And the one where she was here with him while our daughter lay in a hospital bed. I should have felt shock, pain, betrayal, but all I felt was clarity. I pushed the barn door open, not kicked, not slammed, just pushed, slow and deliberate. The old hinges creaked, slicing through the easy, drunken laughter inside. Emily turned first, blinking as if pulled from a dream. Then her face changed, a flicker of panic, guilt. Then, just as quickly, she smothered it. "Babe," she said, her voice artificially light, like I was the one acting weird. "What are you doing here?" I stepped inside. The guy, tall, dark-haired, confident in that arrogant, effortless way, just watched me, completely unfazed. I looked at Emily. No words yet, just looked, and waited. She shifted under my gaze. I told you I was with Ashley. Did something happen? Is Lily okay?" She said it with just enough concern, just enough carefully placed worry, that for a second an outsider might believe she actually cared. I didn't blink. "Lily is in the hospital. You'd know that if you had actually cared to show up." A beat of silence. A flicker of something ugly crossed her face. Then she scoffed, actually scoffed, like I was being ridiculous. "Oh my God. Are you serious? You drove all the way here because of that? I told you I was with Ashley. We were just..." I turned to the guy. "What's your name?" He raised an eyebrow. "Jason, not Ashley." I looked back at Emily. Waited. She swallowed, her grip tightening around her drink. "Look, it's not what you think." "Finish that sentence." She faltered. Jason, still unfazed, smirked slightly. "Man, I think you should calm down. Calm down. Calm down." I exhaled sharply through my nose, but my voice was deadly calm. "Oh, you think I should calm down? You think that while my daughter is lying in a hospital bed, struggling to breathe, I should just, what? Let my wife keep entertaining her little secret here in a barn?" Emily rolled her eyes. Actually, rolled her eyes. "Oh my God. You're making this so dramatic. Nothing happened, okay? We were just talking." I turned to Jason. He just gave me a slow, lazy shrug. So that's how this was going to go. A quiet settled between us, thick and suffocating. Emily looked at me, waiting to see what I'd do. Maybe she expected me to yell. Maybe she expected me to turn and walk away, defeated. But what she didn't expect was the one thing I did. I smiled. Not a happy smile, not an amused one, but the kind that made her own expression falter just for a second. Then finally I spoke. "You know what, Emily?" I said, my voice even steady. "You're right. Let's not be dramatic. You can stay right here, with Jason. And tomorrow morning, I'll let our lawyer handle the rest." And with that, I turned and walked right out of the barn. I didn't need to see her reaction to know what it was. I walked out of that barn without looking back. Not because I wasn't angry, not because I wasn't hurt, but because, in that moment, I refused to give Emily the satisfaction of seeing me unravel. I refused to stand there and argue, to let her twist reality into whatever excuse she had lined up. I had seen enough. The cold night air hit me like a slap, but it didn't clear my head. Nothing could. My mind was a storm, thoughts crashing against each other so violently I could barely process them. The woman I had built a life with, the mother of my child, had stood there, in that barn, in her cozy little bubble, with that man, Jason. And she had looked me in the eye and lied. She had rolled her eyes at me like I was the problem. I reached my car, yanked the door open, and got in. My fingers tightened around the steering wheel, my whole body brimming with something I couldn't let loose. If I did, I wouldn't stop. I had a choice now. I could go home, let the night swallow me whole, wake up in a house that still smelled like her, surrounded by traces of the life I thought we had. Or, I could go back to the hospital. To Lily. That wasn't even a choice. I started the engine and drove. The drive back was a blur. I didn't even remember the roads, just the constant replay of her face, her voice, the way she had brushed me off like I was an inconvenience. But the second I stepped into Lily's hospital room, everything else disappeared. She was awake. Small, fragile, but awake. Her big brown eyes flickered up at me and a tired, soft smile stretched across her face. Daddy. I felt something crack in my chest. Hey, baby. I forced my voice to stay steady as I moved to her bedside. Her little hand reached out for me and I took it, pressing it against my cheek. I hadn't cried since I was a kid, but I swear, if she had held my hand a second longer, I would have broken that streak. Lily blinked up at me, still drowsy from the meds. Where's Mommy? The question punched me in the stomach. I swallowed hard. She had something important to do tonight. It wasn't a lie. Not really. It just wasn't something a 6-year-old needed to hear. Lily accepted it without question. She was too young to know what betrayal looked like, too innocent to understand that the woman she loved had chosen something else over her. She yawned, her small fingers curling around mine as she drifted off again. I stayed there, unmoving, watching her sleep. That was the moment I knew. Emily wasn't just a cheating wife. She was a woman who had failed as a mother. And I would never let her fail Lily again. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I sat there all night, thoughts spiraling, scenarios playing out in my mind like a film on loop. What was Emily doing right now? Was she even thinking about Lily? Or was she still with Jason, drinking, laughing, maybe even more than that? I didn't want to know. I only knew one thing. I was done. Morning came slow, dragging in sunlight that felt too bright, too normal for a world that had shattered overnight. Nurses came in, checking Lily's vitals, adjusting her for. I answered questions on autopilot, nodding, smiling where needed, but inside I was somewhere else. Then my phone vibrated. I didn't have to look to know who it was. Emily. I let it ring. Then came the text. Emily, where are you? Why aren't you answering? Another one. Emily, I'm coming to the hospital. We need to talk. I exhaled through my nose, jaw tightening. Now she cared? Now, after everything? After her little barn adventure, she suddenly wanted to be a wife and mother again? I was still staring at my phone when Lily stirred beside me, her small voice breaking through my thoughts. Daddy? I looked down instantly. Yeah, baby? Her fingers curled in the blanket. Can I have pancakes when we go home? God. This kid. Even in a hospital bed, she was thinking about breakfast. I forced a smile. You can have as many pancakes as you want, sweetheart. She grinned, satisfied, then drifted back to sleep. And that's when I made my decision. By the time Emily got here, she wouldn't be talking to her husband anymore. She'd be talking to a man who was about to leave her behind. I stood there, coffee cup in hand, watching Emily pull into the parking lot like she actually belonged here. Like she hadn't just spent last night in a barn, whispering with some guy while our daughter lay in a hospital bed. And the cherry on top? Ashley was right beside her, her loyal little sidekick ready to clean up whatever mess Emily had made. I took a slow sip of my coffee, waiting. Observing. Emily parked, but she didn't get out right away. I could see them talking, Emily gesturing, Ashley nodding, both of them looking tense. Damage control. They were planning their story. I almost laughed. Finally, Emily stepped out, adjusting her jacket like she was preparing for some grand entrance. Ashley followed. They spotted me immediately, but instead of looking guilty, Emily had the audacity to look annoyed. I didn't move. Didn't react. Just waited as she walked up. Fake concern plastered across her face. Where the hell did you go last night? She snapped. Like I was the one in the wrong. I raised an eyebrow. Excuse me? You just left? She continued, folding her arms. You didn't answer my calls, my texts. You could have at least let me explain. Explain. I let the word settle between us. Just let it hang there for a second, tasting the sheer bullshit of it. Ashley, ever the enabler, jumped in. Look. I know how this probably looked, but you're overreacting. There it was again. Overreacting. That word had been tossed at me so many times over the past few months. Every time Emily brushed me off. Every time I noticed something was off and questioned her. I was always overreacting. Tell me, Ashley, I said, turning my attention to her. Since you apparently know so much, who was the guy? Ashley didn't even blink. What guy? I huffed out a short laugh. The guy Emily was with, in the barn. The one she was all over while our daughter was struggling to breathe in a hospital bed. Ashley didn't flinch. She was ready for this. That was just a friend. A friend, I repeated, nodding slowly. Right? And you were there too. Ashley hesitated. A flicker of uncertainty. Emily cut in before she could answer. Yes, Emily said, her voice sharp. Too sharp. Ashley was there, and so were a bunch of other people. It was nothing. You're making a big deal out of absolutely nothing. I stared at her. She stared back, daring me to believe her. I didn't. I looked inside the barn before I walked in, I said casually, watching her expression shift just slightly. Didn't see Ashley. Didn't see a bunch of people. Just saw you. And Jason. Emily's jaw tightened. Ashley quickly jumped in. Jason is one of our mutual friends. They were just talking. I tilted my head. Funny, because Emily wasn't just talking. She was standing real close to him, letting him whisper in her ear, letting him put his hand on her waist. Emily scoffed. Scoffed. Jesus, you were so dramatic, she said, shaking her head. You're actually standing here, trying to turn this into some huge betrayal when I was just trying to have a normal night out with friends? A normal night out. That's what she was calling it. The sheer audacity of it made me feel almost detached, like I was watching this conversation happen from above. I took a slow breath. Let me get this straight. Our daughter was in the hospital, I told you, and instead of coming back, you decided your normal night out was more important. Emily shifted. I didn't think it was that serious. You said she was stable. I clenched my jaw. You didn't know that right away. And you still didn't show up. Silence. Then Ashley muttered, Jesus, you're acting like she abandoned her child. I turned to her so fast she actually took a step back. She did abandon her child. And instead of holding her accountable, you're standing here making excuses for her. Ashley opened her mouth, but I cut her off. Tell me the truth, Ashley, I said, voice low. How many times have you covered for her? Ashley stilled. That was all the answer I needed. I turned back to Emily, who was now shifting uncomfortably. Who is he? I asked, calm. Emily hesitated. I told you, a friend. No, I said. Who is he really? Because you sure as hell weren't looking at him like a friend last night. Emily exhaled sharply, rolling her shoulders like she was trying to shake off the pressure. I can't believe this, she muttered, rubbing her temples. I can't believe you're actually making this a thing. I took a step closer. I'll ask one more time. Who is he? Emily met my eyes and I saw it, the calculation. She was deciding which lie to tell next. Then finally she spoke. He's an ex. A heartbeat passed. I stared at her. She stared at me. Ashley looked away. An ex, I repeated. Emily crossed her arms. Yeah, from years ago. It's not a big deal. Not a big deal. I let that sink in. You've been sneaking away to see your ex, I said, slowly, deliberately, while lying to my face, while pretending I was crazy, while making me feel like an idiot for suspecting something was wrong. Emily shook her head. Oh my God, this is exactly why I didn't tell you. You always blow things out of proportion. I let out a sharp laugh. You didn't tell me because you knew it was wrong. She glared at me. Nothing happened. I tilted my head. Are you sure about that? Emily faltered. Just for a second. Just long enough. I took a deep breath, my decision solidifying. You know what? Doesn't matter. Because I'm done. Emily blinked. What? I said I'm done, I repeated. With this conversation. With this marriage. With you. Her face twisted. Are you seriously saying you want a divorce over this? I didn't even hesitate. Yes. For the first time since this started, Emily actually looked taken aback. You're being insane. You're just mad. We'll talk about this when you calm down. I shook my head. I don't need to calm down. I need to be done. Ashley, quiet this whole time, finally whispered, Emily. But Emily wasn't looking at her. She was looking at me, and for the first time she looked worried. Not because she regretted what she did. Not because she was sorry. But because she realized she no longer had control over me. And I had never felt more clear-headed in my entire life. Emily blinked at me, her lips parting slightly like she was about to protest. But no words came out. Good. There was nothing she could say. Nothing I wanted to hear. Her face twisted like she was trying to summon tears. Trying to pull on some last resort sympathy. Like I hadn't just watched her unravel every single lie she had fed me over the past months. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't devastated over what she had done. She was just stunned that I wasn't playing my part. That I wasn't the idiot husband standing there waiting to be manipulated back into place. Ashley was staring at her too now, shifting uncomfortably like she had finally realized that this was bigger than whatever story Emily had spun for her. Emily took a slow breath, clearly scrambling for control. We need to talk about this privately. I let out a humorless laugh. Why? So you can twist the story and gaslight me in private instead of in front of an audience? Emily rolled her eyes, her favorite move whenever she was caught. Jesus Christ, listen to yourself. No, Emily. I took a step closer, lowering my voice, making sure she heard me. Listen to yourself. You lied to my face. You left our daughter alone in a hospital so you could sneak off to see your ex. And now you're standing here, still lying like I'm too stupid to see it. Her eyes darted toward Ashley and I could see it, the panic creeping in, the realization that Ashley wasn't jumping in to defend her anymore. Good. Let her squirm. Ashley cleared her throat, her voice smaller now. Emily, maybe you should just tell him the truth. Emily's head snapped toward her. I almost laughed. Ashley was crumbling. Whatever bullshit story Emily had fed her, it clearly wasn't holding up under real pressure. There is no truth to tell, Emily snapped, her voice suddenly sharp, defensive. I already told him everything. Ashley winced. I took a slow sip of my coffee, watching, letting Emily dig her own grave. Okay, I said, nodding. So if I check your phone right now, it's going to back up everything you've said, right? Emily's expression flickered. There it was. I could practically feel the shift in the air. Her shoulders tensed, her arms crossing over her chest in that classic defensive stance. I'm not giving you my phone. That's an invasion of privacy. I smiled. A slow, knowing smile. Yeah, that's what I thought. Emily let out a frustrated noise, her eyes flashing. Oh my God. Do you even hear yourself? You sound insane. There it was again. That word. Insane. Overreacting. Dramatic. Every single time I had questioned anything over the past few months, those were the words she threw at me. Like they were weapons. She had been setting this up for months. Making me feel like I was the crazy one. Making me doubt my own gut. But she messed up. Because now I had proof. I tilted my head, studying her. Tell me something, Emily. If I go through our phone records, am I going to see a whole lot of calls to a number that isn't mine? Her jaw tightened. If I go through your messages, am I going to find texts that mysteriously got deleted? Her fingers curled into fists. If I go back through the past 6 months, am I going to find a pattern? Girl trips that weren't girl trips? Late nights where you lost track of time. Silence. Thick, heavy silence. Ashley was staring at her now too, her expression shifting from discomfort to something more complicated. Emily was trapped. She knew it. She could either keep lying and dig herself in deeper, or she could tell the truth and lose everything. I already knew what she was going to choose. She lifted her chin slightly, regaining that fake confidence, and looked me dead in the eye. I'm not doing this with you, she said flatly. I don't have to prove myself to you. I exhaled through my nose. Nodded. That's all I needed to hear. I pulled my phone from my pocket and opened my contacts. Emily's eyes widened. Who are you calling? She demanded. I didn't answer. I just scrolled to the one person she never thought I'd call. And then, loud and clear, I said, Hey, Mark. You free to meet today? We need to talk. Emily froze. Completely. Utterly. Froze. Because Mark wasn't just a name. Mark was our divorce lawyer. The moment Emily heard Mark's name, her entire body stiffened. Her mouth opened slightly as if to protest, but no words came out. Good. There was nothing she could say. Nothing that would stop what was already set in motion. Ashley looked between us, her expression a mixture of shock and discomfort. She had spent the last few months backing Emily up, feeding into her lies, but now? Now she looked like she was realizing just how deep in it she was. I didn't move. Didn't blink. Just waited as the words sank in. Emily finally snapped out of it, her voice sharp. Are you kidding me? I held her gaze. Do I look like I'm kidding? Her lips parted, then closed. Her mind was racing, scrambling for a way out. For a way to flip the script. She went for the classic move. She laughed. A sharp, humorless sound full of fake disbelief. You're actually serious. You're calling a lawyer because of this. I tilted my head, watching her. Because of this? You mean because you've been sneaking around with your ex while lying to my face? Or because you left our daughter alone in a hospital so you could play around in a barn with some guy? Ashley let out a quiet breath, shifting uncomfortably. She should feel uncomfortable. She had been complicit in this mess, backing Emily up, feeding her ego, helping her lie. Emily scoffed, arms crossing. I already told you nothing happened. I let out a slow breath. You keep saying that. Like it means something. Her jaw clenched. Oh my God, you're so dramatic. You can't just run to a lawyer every time we have a fight. This isn't a fight, Emily. My voice was steady. This is the end. Her face twitched. Just slightly. A flicker of something, fear? Realization? She didn't like that. She wasn't in control anymore. Ashley finally spoke, her voice hesitant. Look, maybe you guys just need to take a second and breathe before doing anything drastic. I turned to her, expression unreadable. Ashley, let me ask you something. She stiffened. What? Did you know? Her throat bobbed slightly. No, what? I held her gaze. That Emily was seeing her ex behind my back. That these girls' trips were never girls' trips. That every time she came home late, she was probably with him. Did you know? Ashley hesitated. That was all I needed to see. Her shoulders slumped slightly. I didn't think it was like that. I laughed, sharp and cold. Like what, exactly? Ashley looked at Emily almost like she was waiting for permission to speak. Like she was afraid of saying the wrong thing. Emily glared at her. Ashley exhaled. I knew she was talking to him again, she admitted, voice quiet. But she said it was just old friends catching up. Emily's head snapped toward her. Ashley, shut up. Ashley, shut up. But it was too late. I nodded slowly. Right? So you did know. Ashley swallowed hard. I didn't think she would actually what? I interrupted. Actually cheat? Actually sneak around? Actually leave me sitting in a hospital room with my sick daughter while she laughed it up with some other guy? Ashley looked away. I didn't know about that. I exhaled. But you still covered for her. Ashley flinched. Emily had enough. Are you done playing detective? She snapped, stepping closer to me. Because this is getting pathetic. I looked at her, really looked at her, and I realized something. She wasn't panicking because she had lost me. She was panicking because she had lost control over me. For months, maybe longer, she had been playing me, making me feel like I was crazy, twisting things to make herself the victim every time I questioned her. But now I wasn't giving her a reaction. I wasn't fighting. I wasn't begging her for the truth. I was just done. I took another sip of coffee. I'm taking Lily and filing for divorce. Emily lost it. Oh, you are not taking my daughter from me. She spat, her voice shaking with anger. I raised an eyebrow. Your daughter. She faltered. She's our daughter, I said calmly. But while you were out playing with your ex, who was the one sitting beside her hospital bed? Emily didn't answer. I leaned in slightly. Who was the one holding her hand when she was struggling to breathe? She exhaled sharply, avoiding my eyes. I nodded. That's what I thought. Her mouth opened, then closed. Then she did the only thing she could do. She tried to flip the script. You know what? She said, forcing out a laugh. Fine. File for divorce. But don't come crying to me when you realize you can't handle being a single dad. There it was. The last desperate play. I smiled. A slow, steady, knowing smile. You're right, Emily, I said. I won't come crying to you. I turned, walking away. Not running. Not storming off in anger. Just leaving. And as I did, I said the last words I would ever say to her as her husband. Because I can promise you, life without you is going to be a hell of a lot easier. I walked away and didn't look back. Not at Emily, not at Ashley, not at the mess they had both tangled themselves in. I was done. Truly, completely done. But being done with a person doesn't mean being done with the consequences they leave behind. I wasn't walking away from some casual breakup. This wasn't just a relationship ending. It was a life unraveling. A marriage. A home. A child caught in the middle. And I had no doubt that Emily, in all her shameless audacity, wasn't going to make this easy. I got into my car, started the engine, and let out a slow breath. The hospital loomed behind me, cold and sterile, a reminder of why I was here in the first place. I wasn't just fighting for myself, I was fighting for Lily. And Emily? She didn't deserve the title of mother anymore. I pulled out of the parking lot and drove. Not home. Not yet. To Mark. Mark's office was downtown, nestled in a sleek glass building that reeked of expensive divorces and airtight contracts. I had met him once before, years ago, when a close friend went through a nasty split. At the time, I had listened to their horror stories, shaking my head, thinking that'll never be me. Now here I was. The receptionist looked up as I entered. Do you have an appointment? No, I said, my voice calm but firm. But tell Mark it's urgent. He knows me. She studied me for a second, probably recognizing the look of a man who had just had his world burned down around him, then nodded. One moment. I sat in the waiting area, my mind racing. Every second counted. Emily wasn't stupid. She'd go home, she'd pace, she'd strategize. Maybe she'd even call Jason, the ex she swore was just a friend. She'd try to get ahead of me. And I wasn't about to let her. A door opened. He'll see you now. I walked in. Mark was seated at his desk, sharp suit, sharper eyes. He gestured for me to sit. I heard you had a rough night, he said, leaning back. I let out a humorless laugh. That's one way to put it. He nodded. Talk to me. So I did. I told him everything. The months of weird behavior. The lies. The excuses. The moment it all cracked open in that barn. Mark listened, silent and focused, taking it all in, processing. Then, when I was done, he exhaled and leaned forward. Okay, here's the deal. If you're serious about divorce, you need to act fast. I am, I said without hesitation. Good, he said. Because she's going to fight you. Hard. I nodded. I expected that. She's going to play dirty, he continued. She's going to spin the narrative. Make you out to be controlling, paranoid. She's going to weaponize Lily, make herself look like the perfect mother. And if we don't move quickly, she'll file first, which puts you on the defensive. I clenched my jaw. So what do we do? Mark smiled slightly. A lawyer's smile. We make sure she never gets that chance. By the time I left his office, things were already in motion. Papers were being drafted. Strategies were being put in place. This wasn't just about leaving Emily. This was about making sure she couldn't manipulate her way out of what she had done. I drove home, bracing myself, because even though I had won the first battle, the war was about to begin. And Emily? She was just getting started. I pulled into the driveway, gripping the steering wheel for a moment before getting out. My house, our house, stood in front of me, looking exactly the same as it had yesterday, last week, last year. But it wasn't the same. Nothing was the same. I stepped out of the car, my mind already bracing for what was waiting inside. Emily had beaten me here, of course. I knew she would. The moment I left the hospital, she had probably floored at home, pacing the house, rehearsing her next move, her next lie. I wasn't playing her game anymore. I opened the front door. Emily was standing in the living room, arms crossed, jaw tight. She had changed clothes, swapped the barn party outfit for something softer, more innocent. It was calculated. She had always known how to make herself look like the victim. The moment she saw me, she scoffed. Well, look who finally decided to come home. I closed the door behind me, taking my time setting down my keys. You really want to start with that? Her eyes narrowed. You walked out of the hospital. You left me standing there like an idiot. I let out a short laugh. Oh, I left you? That's cute, Emily. Really? She took a deep breath, clearly trying to control the conversation. You're being irrational. You don't just blow up a marriage over one mistake. One mistake. I looked at her, really looked at her. And I realized something. She still thought she had a chance. She thought if she talked fast enough, twisted things just right, she could convince me that what she did wasn't that bad. That I was the unreasonable one. You think this is about one mistake? I asked, voice eerily calm. Emily flinched slightly. It was just a conversation. I laughed, shaking my head. A conversation? You were standing in a barn with some guy, letting him put his hands on you while I was in a goddamn hospital with our daughter. Her lips pressed into a thin line. I told you. I didn't know it was that serious. Stop. I cut her off. Stop talking. Just listen. She shut her mouth, but her arms were still crossed, her body still defensive. I stepped closer, not in anger, not to intimidate, just to make sure she heard me. This isn't about the barn, I said, voice steady. This is about the months of lying, the disappearing, the girls' trips that were never girls' trips. It's about every time you made me feel like I was crazy for noticing something was off. Her fingers twitched slightly. To tell. A sign she knew I was right but refused to admit it. You played me, I continued. For months. Maybe longer. You looked me in the eye, told me you loved me, then ran off to him. And the second I caught you, you didn't apologize. You didn't try to fix it. You got angry. You called me dramatic. And when I said I was done, you didn't cry. You didn't beg. You threatened me. Emily's jaw tightened. I didn't threaten you. I let out another humorless laugh. Oh, really? Don't make any dumb decisions before we talk? That's not a threat. She exhaled sharply, rolling her eyes. That wasn't stop. Lying. Silence. Thick, suffocating silence. I took a slow breath. It's over, Emily. Her body tensed. You don't just get to decide that, I already did. Her lips parted slightly, realization finally sinking in. You don't mean it, she said, voice quieter now, uncertain. You're just mad. I smiled. A slow, cold smile. No, Emily. For the first time in months, I'm not mad. I'm just done. She swallowed. I could see the gears turning, see her scrambling for a new angle. And sure enough, she found one. Her face shifted, her posture softened, and just like that, she dropped into remorseful wife mode. I made a mistake, she said, voice trembling just enough to sound genuine. I was stupid. Selfish. I got caught up in something that didn't mean anything. But we have a family, don't we? I didn't react. She took a small step forward. Lily needs us. That one got me. Not because she was right, but because she had the nerve to use Lily as her last shield. I stared at her, my face unreadable. Now you care about what Lily needs? She blinked. What, of course I do. Did you care when you were sneaking off? I asked. Did you care when you left her in a hospital bed so you could see him? She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. I nodded slowly. That's what I thought. Her breath hitched slightly, and for the first time I saw it fear. Not fear of losing me. Fear of losing the life she had built. The house. The reputation. The illusion of being a perfect wife and mother. And for the first time, she knew she was actually losing it. I walked past her, heading upstairs. She spun around. Where are you going? To pack. Her footsteps followed behind me, sharp, desperate. Pack what? You're really leaving. I stopped at the top of the stairs and turned to look at her one last time. No, I said simply. You are. Her face crumbled. And for the first time since this started, she had no words. Emily stood at the bottom of the stairs, completely still, like her brain hadn't fully processed what I just said. Like it didn't compute that I was serious. You are. Her lips parted slightly, her eyes darting around as if searching for an argument, a loophole, a way to regain control. But she found nothing. Because there was nothing left. Then, just like that, her expression changed. The guilt, the fear gone. Replaced by pure, raw rage. You think you can just throw me out? She snapped, voice rising. This is my house too. I stared at her. Calm. Unmoved. Not for long. Her hands curled into fists. You don't get to make that decision. I tilted my head. Actually, I do. Because I already spoke to Mark. There. The moment she realized. Her nostrils flared. You went to a lawyer? I smiled slightly. First thing this morning. Her face twisted. You were such a petty, pathetic little, careful Emily, I interrupted. The more you talk, the worse this gets for you. She huffed out a sharp breath, pacing now, her arms flailing as she ranted. You are blowing this so out of proportion. You go behind my back and file for divorce just because I had a conversation with someone? I laughed. Actually laughed. You really don't stop, do you? She spun to face me. Excuse me. I shook my head. You still think you can lie your way out of this? Like I didn't see you, Emily. Like I didn't walk into that barn and watch you with him. Her jaw clenched, but I wasn't finished. And let's be real here, I continued, stepping down one step, making her look up at me. This isn't the first time. She froze. Bullseye. That flicker of something in her eyes. Guilt, panic, exposure. Told me everything I needed to know. You think I'm stupid? I asked, voice dangerously calm. You think I didn't notice? The girl trips that suddenly became weakly. The way you started keeping your phone on silent. The way you'd get all defensive every time I asked where you were. Emily stiffened. I took another step down. Tell me the truth, Emily. Her lips pressed into a thin line. How long? I asked. Silence. Her eyes darted away. Her breathing picked up. She was cornered. How long? I repeated, stepping down again. Emily snapped. Oh, shut up, she yelled, her voice shaking with fury. You're acting like a damn detective when the truth is, you were never even around enough to notice anything. So what if I went out? So what if I had a little fun? You never cared before. I just stared at her. She realized what she had just admitted. Her mouth clamped shut. Too late. Got it, I said simply. Her breathing was uneven now. She knew she lost. I exhaled through my nose and shook my head. You know what's funny? She crossed her arms, but she looked nervous. What? I actually loved you, I said, voice quiet, honest. I gave you everything. And all this time while I was working my ass off, making sure you and Lily had a good life, you were sneaking around, treating me like a joke. Her lip curled. Oh, please, don't act like some saint. I cut her off. I don't need to. Because at the end of the day, I didn't cheat. She flinched. I nodded slowly. That's the difference between us, Emily. I was never the bad guy. Her face twisted with rage and something else. Fear. Not fear of losing me. Fear of losing the life she had built. She thought she could keep her double life going forever. That I would keep looking the other way. That I would always be too busy, too trusting, too blind to see her for who she really was. But now the illusion was gone. Emily was losing everything. And the best part? She had no one to blame but herself. Emily stood in front of me, breathing heavily, her entire body tense like a cornered animal. She knew it was over. She knew she had lost. But instead of breaking down, instead of showing even an ounce of real remorse, she did what she always did, fought back. "You're such a self-righteous piece of garbage," she spat, her voice trembling. Not with sadness, but with anger. "You act like you were some perfect husband, like you were always around, always caring. But you weren't, were you? You were always at work, always too busy, always—" I held up a hand. "Stop!" She blinked. I took a slow, controlled breath and stepped down the last stair, so we were face to face. "You don't get to rewrite history," I said, voice calm, steady. "You don't get to stand here and pretend like I was some neglectful husband when you were the one sneaking around behind my back." Her eyes flashed. "I wouldn't have had to sneak around if—" "If what?" I interrupted, raising an eyebrow. "If I had paid more attention to you? If I had worshipped you the way Jason did? If I had put my job on hold and followed you around like a lost puppy?" She clenched her jaw. I laughed, shaking my head. "Do you even hear yourself? You had everything. A home, family, a man who would have done anything for you. And instead of appreciating that, you threw it away for what? Some cheap thrill? Some validation from a guy who barely had to try." She flinched but recovered quickly. "I don't regret it." I smiled. "That makes two of us." For a second, just a second, something flickered in her expression. A flash of uncertainty. She hadn't expected that. She had expected me to be devastated, to break down, to beg her to fix things. But I wasn't devastated. I wasn't even angry anymore. I was just free. And that scared her more than anything. Emily crossed her arms, shifting her weight. "So what now?" I exhaled through my nose. "Yeah? You pack a bag." She scoffed. "I'm not leaving." I took out my phone, unlocked it, and held it up. "Mark is already handling the legal side. But if you want to fight me on this, I can have the cops here in 15 minutes. Her eyes widened. I shrugged. "Your choice." For the first time, realization sank in. She had no power here. No leverage. No way out. And she hated it. Emily exhaled sharply, her hands shaking slightly as she turned and stormed up the stairs. A minute later, I heard the slamming of drawers, the sound of things being thrown into a suitcase. I stood there, letting it all settle. She was really leaving. After everything, every lie, every fight, every moment she had made me doubt myself, this was it. I should have felt something. Sadness. Relief. Anything. But all I felt was clarity. A few minutes later, Emily came stomping back down the stairs, suitcase in hand, her face twisted with rage. "I hope you're happy." I smiled slightly. "I will be." Her jaw tightened. "You know you're going to regret this. You think you're so strong now, but when you're alone, when you're struggling to juggle work and Lily and I cut her off." "Emily." She glared at me. I smiled wider. "Get out." Her face flushed with anger. But she didn't argue. She just let out a sharp breath, turned, and walked out the door, slamming it behind her. And just like that, she was gone. The house fell silent. For a long time, I just stood there, staring at the door, letting the moment settle. Then finally, I let out a slow breath. For the first time in months, I wasn't drowning. I wasn't second-guessing myself. I wasn't trapped in Emily's endless web of manipulation and excuses. I was free. A small sound made me turn. At the top of the stairs, standing in her pajamas, was Lily. Her hair was messy from sleep, her little hands clutching the railing. She blinked at me, her voice soft. "Is Mommy gone?" I swallowed, my chest tightening. I walked up the stairs, crouching in front of her. "Yeah, sweetheart," I said gently. "Mommy's gone." She was quiet for a second. Then, in a voice so small it almost broke me, she whispered, "She didn't say goodbye." My throat tightened. I pulled her into my arms, holding her close. "I know, baby," I murmured. "But I'm here. I'm always here." She buried her face in my shoulder. I closed my eyes, inhaling slowly, feeling the weight of it all. Emily was gone. And for the first time in a long, long time, Lily and I were going to be okay.